Alrighty, hello there. Eric Padden once again, and I'd like to thank you for taking a look at this video. Today we're going to be talking about when to sell your silver. Now, a lot of people are getting smart and they're actually starting to buy both bullion and collectible silvers. And I think if you're going to, like any other investment, hold silver or gold or any other precious metals or any investment for that matter, it's nice to kind of have a plan going in. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with just holding and holding this for future generations and building a legacy or what have you. And if that's your plan, certainly you can do that. And I think long term, you're going to go through the different cycles and there'll be ups and downs. But certainly, precious metals is becoming more and more. Certainly in the case of silver anyway, which is an industrial metal that's getting used up all the time. I think it's becoming more and more rare and harder to get, which basic supply and demand tells you that's going to be driving up the prices, right? Now, gold, on the other hand, is a little bit different. The reason that I think silver has more upside than gold myself is simply because silver is constantly being used up as an industrial metal faster than ever before in our history, because there's more and more ways. There's over thousands of new patents introduced every year that are based in silver, and that's not just the typical electrical and batteries and all that, solar panels, things like that, but now they're finding more and more medical uses, and that's actually where a lot of the silver is going nowadays. Even clothing, because silver is such a good antibacterial and antimicrobial, it's used in all different types of medical and anything, your deodorants, all these types of things. So silver is actually disappearing at an alarming rate, and it's because it's been manipulated to be so cheap that it's been used up like this. Now, I think that's going to change. I think the manipulation of JP Morgan and HSBC is finally coming to an end now that it's been exposed, and you're finding that silver and gold are slowly working their way up to their real true market values. Now, once again, my thought is, if you're going to invest and you're going to hold, it'd be nice to have a plan when you go in as to maybe when you'd want to exit. What's your exit strategy? And so I know for me personally, I'm going to keep collecting silver. Today, as I make this video, you're looking at about $37 an ounce. And of course, remember that whenever you look at that, that's always reflective of the actual phantom silver that's out there, is where you're looking at that price. Now, you can recall back in 2008 when we had the first little crash there, you could look at the silver market, and there's never been such a big gap between the ETFs. If you were to buy, SLV silver, okay, you could buy that around $9 an ounce at that time. And yet on eBay, at the same exact time, if you wanted to hold physical silver, okay, that you could hold in your hands, that you knew was real and was there when you needed it, that was going for $35 an ounce. So I mean, what do you think? Is something wrong with that picture? When you're talking about $9 paper silver and you're talking $35 physical silver, kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? And so that's when people started to really start to wonder about the whole manipulation thing. And now it's become exposed, and you might be aware that both JP Morgan and HSBC are getting sued as we speak. And so this has allowed the ratio, which in my other videos I've talked about how you're always looking at a historic ratio of somewhere between 10 to 1 and 16 to 1, somewhere in that range as far as how many ounces of silver it would take to buy an ounce of gold. Now, right now, as we speak, we've bridged the gap from the recent as much as 70 to 1 just a couple years ago, and then 60, 50. As I make this video, we're at 40 to 1 right now. So in other words, it takes about 40 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold as we speak. Now, I believe that the physical reality of silver and gold above ground is way, way, way out of whack compared to what we're seeing as far as the values. For example, you might be aware that silver, because it's being used up, has become less and less available as far as above ground silver. You can look at 1950, when in 1950 there were about 10 billion ounces of silver above ground. There were only at that time maybe 1 billion ounces of gold. And so in 1950 there was a legitimate 10 to 1 physical ratio, which then you could say, okay, that makes sense. The value should be around 10 to 1 as well. And historically you'll find it's been that range, and maybe as much as 16 to 1, but it's always been, once again, in that range. Now, right now, you look at that 10 billion ounces of silver that we had in 1950, and because it's been used up industrially and it's been so cheap, a lot of the mines have no real desire to mine it at a loss, and that's exactly what happens. The only way we get silver really nowadays, I mean, there's a few silver mines out there, but it's mostly a byproduct. You've got, mining for zinc, and they'll come across silver. I mean, that's how we get most of our silver from the earth nowadays, because it's so cheap. It doesn't encourage miners to mine it. So anyway, all those factors have created a scenario where the silver, that big surplus that we had, has now been drained to the point where we have less than 1 billion ounces. There are estimates as low as 500 to 700 million ounces of silver that are available above ground right now. And I can tell you, me personally, when I would order a roll of silver, a couple years ago, it wouldn't take long. I'd have it within a week. Then all of a sudden I noticed about 6 months ago it was taking 2 weeks. Then all of a sudden I noticed the last roll I ordered, probably ordered it about 3 months ago, and I literally just got that last roll a month ago. So I mean, we're talking 2 months now, and I'm just a little guy ordering these things a roll at a time. So I can tell you, silver is definitely getting harder to find. And you might have found and maybe heard about the rumors out there where they're actually offering people a premium. If they'll take 125% in paper, they'll give them 125% of it in paper. Actually encouraging. There's even rumors of 150%. Some of the billionaires out there, you don't really hear as much on the mainstream media, but you've got people like George Soros and Bill Gates and Buffett that are slowly, quietly buying up as much silver as they can, and that's putting a real strain on the market because it's a relatively small market. Silver is, precious metals in general. So anyway, my exit strategy is to watch silver bridge that gap between its current 40 to 1. And to be conservative, I'm thinking when it's around 12 to 1, maybe 10 to 1, would be time to make my move. Only because I think that there will be a bubble and probably it'll come back, and I want to be able to exit this commodities bubble, which I believe we're in the very beginning of. I want to be able to exit it in a position of strength, to move into some more real estate or maybe even a new currency or whatever makes the most sense at that time. So I don't want to hold for future generations, at least not all my silver. I want to be able to move into whatever makes the most sense when that ratio closes from its current 40 to 1. And remember, I don't believe that gold's just going to stay where it's at $14.30 an ounce. I think gold has a long ways to go too. It's just my belief that silver will continue to close that gap. And as it gets closer to 10 to 1, I believe that's the time to exit. Now it might come back down. It could even keep going because the physical reality of gold to silver on the planet right now, we've got about 7 billion ounces of gold. Because remember, that's not used up. It's hoarded away, it's stashed away in vaults, and it's in jewelry and so on. And there's only about maybe 1 billion ounces of silver. Some people estimate as little as 5 to 700 million ounces of silver available right now. So in reality, it should be reversed. We should have a ratio that is much more gold, 7 billion ounces, compared to maybe 1 billion. So maybe a 1 to 7, 1 to 8 ratio right now. But instead, it's the exact opposite of that. It's 40 to 1 as far as the value, which doesn't reflect the physical situation of 7 billion ounces of gold to maybe 1 billion, and if you take the high estimates, of silver. Now combine that with the economy. You've got paper currencies all over the world being created faster than ever before. You've got bailouts and you've got stimulus, and people believe there's more bailouts coming. And all that just dilutes the paper money supply. And whenever in history the paper money supply starts to accelerate, which it always does, and it's lost in value, people always come back to silver and gold. So I believe you should be converting your silver and gold over into, your paper. You should be converting your paper money into silver and gold, and it's just my personal opinion that silver is the way to go because you can buy more of it. It's cheaper, and I believe it has a lot more of an upside as we go from the current 40 to 1 ratio closer to, say, 10 to 1. I think that's a safe exit strategy. It could keep on going, but I don't want to get greedy and then get stuck where all of a sudden it drops back down dramatically, and then you've got to hold for a really long time in order to lock in those profits. So I do believe we're in the beginning of a bubble, a commodities bubble, and I think just like all the excess liquidity created by the Fed, all the dollars all around the world created by the Fed, was what created the dot-com bubble, and then it created the real estate bubble. And if you remember, those bubbles didn't just go up and down. A lot of people think, oh gee, silver shot up, it's a bubble, it's going to go back down. Those bubbles went on for years, okay, and I do believe these metals, precious metals bubbles, are going to go on for years. And it's not just precious metals, it's other commodities as well. But as far as something the average person could invest in, silver, physical silver, is the way to go. So once again, thank you very much for your time. I hope that helped you out and kind of giving yourself a strategy as to, buying and holding and maybe one day liquidating your silver. My name is Eric Padden, and you can give me a call at 858-705-2487. You can also jump on isncoinsbusiness.com on my blog. There's a lot of great articles on there, a lot of great videos to kind of educate you about the economy and silver in general. So thank you very much for your time, and have a great day. I'll catch up with you on the next video.